The wind off the coast was cold that morning, the kind that slips under your skin and stays there. Ruth Anderson had only come home to drop off a basket of fruit for her son's family. But the moment she stepped onto the porch, the laughter inside stopped. Then came the shout, sharp, cutting through the air like broken glass. "Why is that old woman here? We don't have space." Her own daughter-in-law's voice. The words hit harder than the wind ever could. The door slammed in her face, and for a moment Ruth just stood there, outside her own house, realizing it wasn't the sea that had turned cold. It was her family. Before we begin part 1 of Ruth's story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss how this quiet woman finds her voice again. Tap like if you believe no parent deserves to be treated this way. And share this story with someone who's ever felt unappreciated. Now let's step inside the house where respect was lost, and see how Ruth took it back. I drove 3 hours to get here, humming along to the radio thinking maybe, just maybe they'd be happy to see me. The sky over the Oregon coast was clear that day, seagulls cutting through the wind like paper kites. I parked in front of my old house, the one I built after my husband died. And for a moment it felt like coming home. Then I heard the music. Loud, careless laughter. The smell of barbecue. My heart sank a little. I wasn't invited to anything, but I told myself it's my home too. I climbed the porch steps, clutching the small key I'd carried for 30 years. Before I could even knock, the front door swung open. Clara stood there, my daughter-in-law, all polished nails and tight smile. She froze for a second, then rolled her eyes. "What's she doing here again? We said no guests this weekend." Guess. That word hit harder than I expected. I glanced past her shoulder. My grandkids were playing in the living room. My son Evan was flipping burgers by the grill, pretending not to notice me. I raised a hand, waved a little. He looked away. "Clara," I said softly, "I just wanted to drop off the quilt I finished for Ella's birthday." She folded her arms. "You can leave it on the porch. We've got company. There was a time she called me Mom. Now it was just you." I stood there like a fool while the wind whipped my hair across my face. Someone inside laughed, one of Clara's friends, I think. They were singing over the music, talking about how nice their house looked after all the renovations. My house, the one I'd poured my bones into one paycheck at a time. I looked down at the welcome mat. It used to say home is where Mom is. Now it read the Johnsons. Their last name, not mine. Clara shifted impatiently. "Is there something else?" she asked. I tried to smile. "I'd like to see the kids." "They're busy," she said. "You can call next week." Next week. Always next week. Behind her I caught a glimpse of the kitchen. New cabinets, new lights. The old painting I'd made with my students was gone from the wall. Everything that was once me had been erased. "They didn't just take my house," I whispered, mostly to myself. "They took my place in my own family." She must have heard the tremor in my voice, but she didn't care. She just pushed the door a little tighter against her hip. "Have a good day, Ruth." The door shut. Not slammed, not rude, just final. That's worse, you know. When someone closes the door on you gently, as if you're nothing at all. For a while I stood there, hand still raised, key digging into my palm. I could feel the metal biting my skin, reminding me this was real. Across the street, Mrs. Hanley peeked through her blinds. The neighbor's dog barked once, then stopped, as if the world decided to move on without me. I turned back toward my car, slow and careful, like every step was breaking something inside me. The wind carried their laughter out to the road. It followed me all the way to the gate. When I reached the mailbox, I saw a stack of flyers inside. One had a picture of a young family smiling in front of a beach house. The caption read, "Make memories that last." I almost laughed. Memories. That's all I had left. I looked over my shoulder one last time. The house shimmered in the afternoon sun, paint bright and perfect. For a second I saw flashes of the past. Evan is a boy chasing bubbles in that same yard, his father lifting him high into the air. My hands covered in paint from fixing the fence. It used to smell like sawdust and fresh bread. Now it smelled like smoke and strangers. The voice inside my head whispered, "Go home." But this was supposed to be home. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "Hey Mom, sorry we're busy today. I'll call you next week, okay?" I didn't reply. I just sat in the car, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked older than I remembered. "You built everything, Ruth," I murmured. "Brick by brick. And somehow you ended up on the outside." I started the engine but didn't drive off right away. Through the windshield I could still see the windows glowing warm with light, like the house itself was alive. Just not for me anymore. The part of me wanted to march back up those steps, shout until someone listened. But another part, the quieter one, told me to save my breath. Because someday, they'd remember what silence feels like when the person who kept everything together finally stopped speaking. I took a deep breath, shifted into drive, and let the car roll forward. The ocean glittered beside the road, calm and endless. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, the key still in my other hand. "They think they've shut me out," I whispered, voice steady now. "But doors can be opened again." And with that, I drove away, slow, deliberate, leaving behind the house I built and the people who forgot who built it. But somewhere inside me a new sound started to rise. Not the slam of a door, but the quiet click of resolve. It feels like a lifetime ago, but I can still smell the fabric dye and machine oil that clung to that little garage. After my husband passed, I didn't have much left, just a box of his tools, an old sewing machine, and a promise I made to myself, that I'd give Evan a home worth coming back to. The first few months were brutal. The winters in Oregon bite straight through your bones, and that garage was colder than forgiveness. I'd sit there at midnight with a cup of weak coffee, stitching dresses for neighbors, hemming uniforms for school kids, patching fishermen's coats. Every stitch felt like a heartbeat. Every dollar went into an envelope taped above the light switch. Sometimes the needle slipped and stabbed my finger. I'd curse, press a rag against the blood, then keep going. The radio would play old love songs my husband used to hum, and the fan rattled like it was cheering me on. The rhythm of that machine became my prayer. One stitch for hope, one for tomorrow. It took years, 8 of them, to save enough. $50,000. That number felt impossible, but one morning, I walked into the bank with my hands shaking and opened an account under my name. The teller smiled when I wrote the label myself. For our home, R&A. R for Ruth, A for Andrew, my husband. Even though he was gone, I still built it with him. When the land finally became ours, Evan came down every weekend to help. He was 25 then, all energy and sunburn. We'd paint from sunrise till the light faded, splashing more paint on ourselves than on the walls. The smell of salt air mixed with fresh paint. It smelled like a new start. He held the roller up once and said, "We're not just painting walls, Mom." I smiled, the kind of smile you save for moments that actually matter. "No, son," I told him. "We're painting tomorrow." He laughed, not realizing how serious I was. But I meant every word. That house wasn't just lumber and nails. It was proof that loss didn't win. It was the sound of survival, the kind you earn one slow breath at a time. We chose the color together. A soft blue, the same shade as the ocean when the sun hides behind the clouds. Evan said it made him feel calm. I told him it made me feel close to heaven. Every wall had a memory. The kitchen where we marked his height with pencil lines. The porch where I drank coffee watching the gulls dive. The living room where I framed his art school acceptance letter. And in the garage, my old sewing space, I kept the same wobbly table and that jar of broken needles. They reminded me what it took to get here. I didn't want perfect things, I wanted earned ones. Some nights after Evan went home, I'd walk through the half-finished rooms barefoot, touching the cool drywall. I'd whisper to myself, "You did this, Ruth. You made something from nothing." I still remember the day we put up the last board. The house looked small from the outside, but inside, it held every bit of love I had left. I pressed my thumb, still rough from years of sewing, onto the page of my savings book. The smudge of oil and dust left a faint print next to the words for our home. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. I told Evan, one day when I'm gone, this will be yours. He laughed and said, "You'll outlive me, Mom." I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to. Funny thing about homes, you think they'll protect you, hold your memories safe. You never imagine the day someone you love will make it feel like a stranger's house. But back then I didn't know any of that. Back then it was just me, my boy, and a dream stitched together by calloused hands and late nights. And for a long time that was enough. When I came back a week later, the driveway was full, 3 cars. Bikes scattered across the lawn, toys everywhere. From the street, my house looked like someone else's summer rental. I stood there for a moment trying to convince myself this was still home. The front door was wide open, curtains flapping in the wind. Inside, laughter echoed down the hallway. I stepped in quietly, my shoes brushing against sand and crumbs. The living room was crowded. Clara's cousins, her sister, even her mother sitting on my couch, eating takeout straight from the boxes. Clara looked up from her phone. "Oh, you're here." She didn't sound surprised, just inconvenienced. "What's going on?" I asked. "Why are there so many people here?" She shrugged. "Evan said we could stay as long as we want. It's summer and the kids love the beach." I looked around. My antique lamp gone. My mother's china cracked and stacked in the sink. The walls were covered with cheap decorations, plastic shells glued into picture frames. The air smelled like sunscreen and spilled soda. "Where's Evan?" I asked. "Work," she said without looking at me. "He said you were fine with us being here. I mean, it's family, right?" Family. The word burned. I walked down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. My bedroom door, my sanctuary, was wide open. Inside, chaos. My quilt was gone, replaced by cartoon bed sheets. The rocking chair where I used to sit and read was covered in toys. And on the nightstand where my husband's photo once sat, there was a half-empty juice box. "Clara," I called out, my voice shaking, "why is my room like this?" She appeared at the doorway, arms crossed. "It's not your room anymore. We needed a playroom for the kids. Evan said you're hardly here anyway. You've got your apartment in town, right?" For a second I couldn't speak. My throat closed up like I was swallowing glass. I looked around again. This wasn't clutter, it was erasure. Every trace of me had been pushed out, painted over, replaced with noise. Then something caught my eye. Under the dresser, half hidden in the dust, the torn photograph. I bent down to pick it up. It was the picture from our 25th anniversary. The one of me and Andrew standing in front of this very house, before the paint faded and before grief turned our laughter into silence. But it wasn't whole. My face had been ripped clean out. I froze. The paper trembled in my hand. For a moment I wasn't in that room anymore. I was back at the funeral, standing in the rain, clutching a folded flag, while Evan held my elbow and whispered, "We'll be okay, Mom." We promised each other this house would always be our safe place. And now it was a playground for strangers. I blinked, trying to steady myself. "Who tore this photo?" I asked quietly. Clara rolled her eyes. "Oh, that old thing. The kids probably got to it." "Don't be so dramatic." I stared at her, searching for even a flicker of respect. There was none. "I'll fix it later," she said, brushing past me. "We're having dinner soon. You can stay if you want, but maybe just keep out of the way, okay?" That was it. The casual cruelty. The entitlement. Like I was a guest in my own life. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just folded the torn photo and slipped it into my coat pocket. The edges were sharp enough to sting my fingers. In the kitchen, someone had left the radio on, an old song my husband loved. It used to fill this house with warmth. Now it sounded like a ghost. I walked to the front door. The sun was setting, the waves crashing faintly in the distance. Behind me, laughter and clinking glasses, Clara's family toasting to their good fortune. In my dining room with my dishes. I could have said something. I could have demanded they leave. But instead I did what women like me always do, we swallow it. We turn heartbreak into silence. As I stepped off the porch I heard Clara call out, "Close the door on your way out." I didn't. I left it open just a crack. Because something in me was shifting, quietly like a storm gathering at sea. I walked down the path toward my car, the torn photograph burning against my palm. For the first time in years the house didn't feel like home, but I knew this much. One day they'd remember whose hands built it. The house was dark when I came back. Midnight on the coast always feels colder than it should. Like the air itself knows you don't belong there. I parked a block away, walked the rest of the way in silence, the gravel crunching under my shoes. Every window was black, except for one faint glow in the living room. I waited, watched for movement. Nothing. Felt strange using my own key like a thief. The lock clicked and I slipped inside. The place smelled like cheap candles and salt. The living room was a mess, blankets, toys, half-empty wine glasses. I held my breath, listening for Clara's laugh, for my son's voice. All I heard was the steady hum of the fridge and the ocean beyond the walls. I crept toward the hallway, my flashlight shaking a little. Every picture that used to hang there, my husband's diploma, Evan's childhood art, was gone. In their place were cheap family portraits of Clara's relatives, smiling like they'd always owned the place. I stopped at the end of the hall, in front of the linen closet. Except it wasn't just the linen closet. Behind the bottom shelf there was a false panel. Andrew built it himself years ago, said it was a safe spot for important things. I used to keep our marriage license, the deed, and later my will. I pushed the shelf aside and reached in. The wood was cold and rough under my fingers. The folder wasn't there. My stomach dropped. I crouched down, flashlight beam darting through the space. Empty. Except for one manila envelope, half torn and sticking out of the corner. I pulled it out slowly, afraid of what I already knew. Inside were photocopies, my name, my signature, the deed to the house. But the signature wasn't mine. It looked like someone had traced it. Shaky, almost perfect. The document said the property was transferred to Evan and Clara Johnson. My chest went tight. I flipped through the rest, my breath catching with every page. Medical records. Notes from some clinic I'd never heard of. The fake diagnosis stamped across the top. Early onset dementia. Mentally unfit for financial decisions. There was handwriting on the side, looping and neat, written in blue ink. Once she's declared unfit, we can sell for $320,000. See, Fee Clara. I stared at those letters until they blurred. The flashlight trembled in my hand. The walls felt closer, the air thicker. I couldn't tell if the roaring in my ears was the ocean outside or my own heartbeat breaking through. I sank to the floor, the papers sliding from my fingers. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just betrayal. This was strategy. Planning. My son and his wife didn't just forget me, they erased me. The flashlight rolled away, spilling light across the carpet. And in that beam I saw the corner of another paper. My will. The one I wrote years ago, the one that said the house would stay in the family but never be sold. They'd crossed out entire paragraphs in red pen, like my words were optional. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying not to sob. I'd lost my husband, my youth, and now my dignity, taken by the people I raised. But then something changed. The tears stopped halfway down my cheeks. My breathing slowed. I picked up the flashlight again, shining it over the forged signature, the fake diagnosis, the scribbled note about the $320,000. And for the first time in months my hands stopped shaking. They thought I was losing my mind. They wanted me to believe it too. Maybe that's what hurt the most, that for a while I almost did. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my house key. The same one I'd carried since the day I built this place. The metal was warm from my palm. I squeezed it tight until it dug into my skin. No more silence, I whispered. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It was lower, steadier, almost calm. I stood up, gathered the papers, and folded them neatly back into the envelope. Evidence. That's what it was now. Not heartbreak. Not confusion. Proof. I turned off the flashlight and stood in the dark for a moment. The house creaked softly, almost like it was breathing. For years I thought these walls protected me. But tonight they were witnesses. They saw what was done to me, and I'd make sure the world saw it too. As I stepped out, the wind from the ocean rushed through the door, scattering a few papers across the floor behind me. I didn't bother picking them up. Let them see what they'd done when they woke up. Let them wonder how much I knew. I locked the door from the outside, the click echoing like a promise. Then I looked back one last time, at the dark windows of the house I built with love, now filled with lies. They wanted me gone, I said quietly, but I'm not the one who's leaving. And for the first time in a long time I meant it. The next morning I sat in a diner that smelled like burnt toast and old coffee. The kind of place where no one asks questions, just keeps refilling your cup until you stop shaking. The sun came through the blinds in pale stripes, landing right on the crack of my chipped porcelain mug. I hadn't slept. Not a minute. My head felt heavy, but my heart was on fire. The waitress poured more coffee and smiled like she pitied me. I thanked her, then pulled my old savings book from my bag. The cover was soft and worn, corners bent from decades of being opened and closed by the same hands. Inside, the ink had started to fade, but the words were still mine. Every deposit, every scribble, every sacrifice. I trace one of the lines with my finger. April 1999, $200 from sewing curtains. October 2003, $1,000 from wedding dress alterations. For our home. I built that house one stitch at a time. I didn't owe it to anyone. For a moment I just stared at the page, feeling the weight of every year written there. The ink might have faded, but I hadn't. I built everything alone, I whispered. I can defend it alone. The sentence came out steadier than I expected. I looked out the diner window. The sky was washed in that cold Oregon blue, the kind that makes everything look sharper. The delivery truck rumbled by. A young couple argued quietly over pancakes. Ordinary life was happening, and mine was about to change forever. I opened my phone, scrolled to the pictures I took the night before. The broken china, the stains on the walls, the fake papers with my forged signature. I stared at them one by one until my hands stopped trembling. Evidence. Not memories. Then I started making calls. First the bank. Yes, this is Ruth Anderson. I need to check the activity on my accounts. And I'd like to make sure no one has access but me. My voice didn't even crack. The man on the other end hesitated, then said he'd flag it immediately. I could hear the surprise in his tone, like he hadn't expected strength from an old woman. Then I called the county office. I need to verify a property title. Yes, in my name. Someone may have filed something without my consent. The clerk said it would take a few hours. I told her I'd wait. When I hung up, I noticed the waitress watching me. She probably thought I was just another lonely widow fighting over land. And maybe I was. But I knew this was bigger than a house. It was about being erased. I took a sip of coffee, lukewarm, bitter, perfect. Then in my head I heard my husband's voice again. You've always been the strong one, Ruth. I smiled. Guess it's my turn again, I said softly. Out came the notebook I used for sewing orders years ago. The one with faded doodles and grocery lists. I turned to a clean page and started writing a new kind of list, short, precise, practical. Step 1. Collect every document. Step 2. Photograph every room. Step 3. Find a lawyer. I wrote each word slowly, carefully, like stitches holding fabric together. This was my new pattern, my new design. The light through the window shifted, spilling across the table. I could see the reflection of my hands in the glass. Wrinkled, steady, sure. Love doesn't mean surrender, I said to myself. And family doesn't mean ownership. People like Clara will never understand that. They think love is a blank check. that being family gives them rights they never earned. But love isn't about taking. It's about respect. And they had burned that bridge to ashes. I finished my coffee, tucked the savings book back into my purse and stood up. My legs ached, but I felt taller somehow. Lighter. Stronger. When I stepped outside, the wind hit me full in the face. It carried the smell of salt and pine, the smell of home. The one they thought they could steal. I pulled out my phone again and snapped a photo of the ocean. Then another of my car keys, resting in my palm. I didn't know why. Maybe to remind myself that I still held something that mattered. Proof that what's mine is still mine. The day had just begun, and so had I. I walked toward my car, whispering one last promise under my breath. They wanted a silent old woman. I opened the door, slid behind the wheel, and looked at the road ahead. While I sat starting the engine, they're about to meet someone else. The bank smelled exactly the same as it did 20 years ago. Polished floors, faint coffee, and that quiet hum of air conditioning that made time feel slower. Mr. Delgado looked up from his desk, his silver glasses sliding down his nose the way they always did. Ruth Anderson, he said, smiling softly. It's been too long. Too long, I replied, though what I really meant was too much. He pulled up my file on the screen, then glanced at me over the monitor. You always saved, Ruth, even when times were hard. He tapped a few keys. You have more strength than you think. I smiled faintly. Guess I'm going to need every bit of it. He turned the screen toward me. My balance glowed in bright numbers. $118,000. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I've been living so small for so long I forgot what that meant. Security, control, choice. Is it enough? I asked quietly. For what? He said. To defend myself. He looked at me for a long second, then nodded. It's more than enough. By the time I stepped outside, the sky was clear, the kind of blue that dares you to start over. I drove straight downtown, my hand steady on the wheel for the first time in weeks. The radio was off. I needed the silence. When I walked into the law office, I expected marble floors and cold stares. Instead, there was a single plant, a coffee machine, and a framed quote on the wall. Justice is quiet until it isn't. Then she appeared, Layla Torres. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, soft voice, the kind of person who listens more than she talks. Mrs. Anderson? She asked, shaking my hand firmly. I've read your message. Come in. Let's talk. Her office was warm, sunlight spilling across a cluttered desk full of files and post-it notes. I told her everything, from Clara's laughter to the fake documents to the words, unfit to own property, printed under my name. She didn't interrupt once, just took notes, occasionally nodding, her jaw tightening at the worst parts. When I finished, she leaned back and exhaled slowly. They mistook kindness for weakness, she said. Let's show them what justice looks like. It wasn't dramatic. It was matter of fact, like she was talking about changing a tire or fixing a leak. But it hit me deep. For months I've been walking around like a ghost, hurt, humiliated, unsure. Now, in one sentence, someone handed me my spine back. Layla went over the plan: file for property protection, report fraud, request a restraining order. Every word sounded heavy, official, like armor being built around me. We'll start with an emergency injunction, she said. That'll keep them from touching your assets while we build the case. And the forged papers? We'll have them nullified. And if the doctor really faked that medical report, he's done. Her tone didn't waver. It was the sound of a woman who'd fought 100 battles like mine, and won most of them. She slid a stack of documents across the desk. You ready to make this official? My hands hovered over the pen. For a second I thought of Evan. His first day of kindergarten. The day he brought home a crayon drawing of our house. The way he used to say, "You'll never be alone, Mom." And then I thought of Clara's voice echoing through the hallway. "You're hardly here anyway." Picked up the pen. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Stroke by stroke I was stitching my life back together. No needle, no thread, just ink and resolve. When I finished, Layla smiled. "Congratulations, Mrs. Anderson. You just stopped being a victim." I laughed quietly. It wasn't joy, it was release. Outside, the air felt lighter. I stood on the courthouse steps as the wind tugged at my scarf, the sun warm on my face. I looked down at my hands, wrinkled, firm, still capable. For months, fear had been my only companion. But in that moment it started to fade, replaced by something quieter but stronger, calm. I wasn't fearless. Fear is what had kept me alive. But now it was balanced by something even more powerful, certainty. They wanted an old woman who'd bow her head and disappear. Instead, they got one who knew the law, had $118,000 in her account, and a lawyer who believed in her. As I walked to my car, Layla's words followed me like a heartbeat. They mistook kindness for weakness. I smiled to myself, unlocking the door. Let's show them otherwise. The courthouse was already surrounded when we pulled up. Cameras, reporters, neighbors, people who'd walked past me for years without a word, were suddenly craning their necks to get a glimpse. The air buzzed with whispers and the flash of phones. Somewhere in that noise, someone said my name like it was part of a headline. I stood beside Layla on the courthouse steps, the morning sun cutting sharp across the concrete. She wore her dark suit like armor. I just wore my truth. Across the lot I saw them, Evan and Clara. They looked smaller than I remembered, almost swallowed by the crowd. Clara's expensive blouse couldn't hide the panic in her face, and Evan, he couldn't even look up. My son, the boy I once carried on my back, now carrying the weight of public shame. "Mrs. Anderson," one reporter called, "how does it feel to face your own family in court?" I didn't answer. There are moments when words cheapen the truth, and this was one of them. Layla stepped forward, calm as a surgeon. "We're here today because too many families think age equals weakness," she said, her voice cutting through the crowd. "Elder abuse isn't a private matter. It's a social crime." That sentence hit harder than the gavel that followed later. The crowd quieted. Even the cameras seemed to blink slower. Inside the courtroom, everything smelled like varnish and nerves. The judge read the charges: fraud, forgery, property theft, falsifying medical documents. Each word landed like a stone dropped in water, rippling through the room. Clara kept glancing at Evan, whispering things that didn't matter anymore. He just sat there, hands folded, eyes down, the picture of regret too late to mean anything. Layla presented the evidence. The fake documents, the forged signature, the note Clara had written about selling my home. Each photo appeared on the screen, and every time the words "once she's declared unfit" flashed, I could hear people gasp. The sound wasn't cruel, it was disbelief. For the first time, their lies were out in the open, no longer whispered behind my back. At one point, Clara's lawyer objected, saying it was a family misunderstanding. Layla turned to him, cool and steady. "Misunderstandings don't come with forged medical reports," she said. "They come with apologies. This came with paperwork and profit motives." The judge nodded. Clara's face flushed deep red. Evan finally looked up. His eyes met mine for the briefest second, and I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, the one who painted the walls of our beach house and promised me I'd never be alone. But that boy was gone. What sat in front of me was a man who had sold his conscience for convenience. When the court recessed, reporters swarmed the steps again. Layla answered questions with quiet precision. "This case isn't about revenge," she said. "It's about reminding society that respect doesn't expire with age." Behind her, Clara tried to hide her face with her purse, and Evan stood motionless, staring at the ground. The same ground where he once helped me plant the garden behind the house. The few neighbors came up to me, hesitant. One of them, Mrs. Green from down the block, whispered, "Ruth, we had no idea. You didn't deserve any of this." I smiled softly. No one ever does. The reporters asked if I wanted to make a statement. I shook my head. There was nothing left to explain. The truth was already louder than anything I could say. As the crowd dispersed, I stayed behind on the courthouse steps. The wind picked up, carrying snippets of conversation, words like fraud, arrest, justice. For months I'd been silent, humiliated behind closed doors. Now my silence had become its own kind of voice, steady, undeniable. Evan and Clara walked past me, escorted by officers toward the side exit. Clara's chin trembled. Evan slowed for half a heartbeat, as if he wanted to speak, but I didn't move. I just looked at him. That was enough. He dropped his gaze again. Layla came to stand beside me, handing me a bottle of water. "You did good," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything," I said. "The truth did." We stood there for a while, watching as the last few reporters packed up their cameras. Across the street, someone had already posted about the case online. The title read, "Mother Wins Justice Against Son and Daughter-in-Law in Property Fraud Case." It spread faster than the lies ever did. And for once I didn't feel exposed. I felt seen. Justice doesn't always roar. It sometimes just breathes. It sits beside you in the sunlight, reminding you that dignity once stolen can be taken back. As we walked to the car, Layla smiled at me. "You know," she said, "this is going to set a precedent." I glanced at the courthouse one last time. "Good," I said. "Let it remind people what family isn't supposed to do." The wind lifted my scarf as we drove away, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a victim walking out of court. I felt like a woman who finally got her name back. The garden behind the courthouse was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes after a storm. The air smelled like rain and cut grass. I sat on the old stone bench, the same one where I used to wait for Evan after school when he was little. Funny how life circles back like that. Same mother, same son, just a different kind of waiting. I heard footsteps on the gravel before I saw him. Evan. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his face pale. He looked like a boy again. Not the man who'd signed my name on fake papers, but the child who used to run to me with scraped knees and wild excuses. He stopped a few feet away, eyes fixed on the ground. "Mom," he said softly, voice breaking. "I don't even know where to start." "Then start with the truth," I said. He swallowed hard, his hands trembling. "I didn't want your house," he said finally. "I just wanted to stop feeling like I owed you everything." The words hung there, heavy and cruel in their honesty. I wanted to prove I could stand on my own. He went on, tears catching in his throat. "Clara kept saying we were nothing without your help. That I was nothing. And I started to believe it. I thought if I took the house, maybe it'd stop hurting every time I looked at what I couldn't give you back." I let the silence stretch between us. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any argument. When I finally spoke, my voice was softer than I expected. "When did my love become your burden, son?" He looked up, his face twisted with guilt. "It didn't. I didn't know how to carry it anymore." For a moment, neither of us moved. I could hear the wind rustling the leaves above us, the faint sound of traffic somewhere far away. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up worrying, all the times I'd chosen quiet over confrontation, all the ways I'd mistaken patience for peace. Evan took a step closer. "Mom, I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted a chance to breathe, to not feel like the kid who always needed saving." I nodded slowly. "You wanted freedom. I understand that." He blinked, confused. "You do?" "Of course," I said. "But freedom doesn't come from taking what isn't yours. Comes from earning what is." He dropped to his knees suddenly, hands clasped, eyes wet. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Please, please forgive me." The sight of my grown son kneeling before me nearly broke whatever pieces I had left. I reached out, placed my hand gently on his shoulder. "Stand up," I said quietly. "From now on you'll stand on your own." He hesitated, then rose slowly, tears streaking down his face. I could see the boy in him again, the one who used to draw houses with crayons and tell me he'd build me a bigger one someday. "I'll fix this," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes." "No," I said softly. "You'll live with it." That's how you fix it. He looked away, his shoulders trembling. I lost everything. I shook my head. Not everything. You still have a chance to be better. Just not here. He nodded, a broken sound escaping his throat. Will you ever talk to me again? I smiled faintly, though it hurt to do it. That depends on who you become when you have no one left to blame. He took a step back, staring at me as if trying to memorize the shape of forgiveness. But there was no forgiveness yet. Only truth. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of church bells from somewhere down the street. Evan wiped his face and whispered, I really thought I was helping my family. And you did, I said. Just not in the way you think. You reminded me that silence doesn't save people. It only hides their mistakes. He stood there a few seconds longer, then turned to leave. I watched him walk away, shoulders hunched, suit rumpled, looking smaller with each step. When he reached the gate, he paused, as if expecting me to call after him. But I didn't. Some goodbyes are meant to stay unspoken. When he was gone, I sat back down on the bench. The sky had cleared, sunlight pouring through the branches. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Not because justice was served, but because I'd finally stopped carrying what wasn't mine to carry. I whispered into the quiet, mostly to myself, he'll learn. Just like I did. Then I closed my eyes, letting the light warm my face. The storm had passed. The house was safe. The truth had spoken. And what was left between us, whatever it was, belonged to time now. A few weeks passed before the dust began to settle. News of the trial spread faster than wildfire. Small-town gossip mixed with justice for dessert. Headlines called me the grandmother who fought back. The local paper printed my picture in front of the courthouse, standing beside Layla. Sunlight on my face like I'd planned it that way. First I hated the attention. But then I saw the comments online, people saying things like, she did what we all wish we had the courage to do. Strangers mailed letters to my P.O. box. Women from Ohio, Texas, even Canada. Some wrote that their own children had stolen from them. Some said I gave them hope. It felt strange being both a warning and an example. Meanwhile, Evan and Clara disappeared from the neighborhood. No more beach parties, no more fancy cars in the driveway. I heard Clara sold off her jewelry to cover legal fees. Evan took a job out of state. They learned that pride, once cracked, doesn't mend easily. One morning there was a knock on my door. It was Clara. Eyes red, makeup gone, hands trembling. She held a small box. These were yours, she said. Inside were the pieces of my mother's china set, glued back together. Some seams still showed. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. I nodded. So am I. But I didn't invite her in. Some doors once closed aren't meant to open again. Later that day, I got a letter from Evan. No excuses this time, no begging. Just 6 words in his handwriting. I'm trying to be better, Mom. I folded it and placed it inside my old savings book, the one labeled for our home R&A. It felt right, keeping it there between what was lost and what was earned. The world moved on, but I didn't return to the life I had before. I spent quiet mornings walking along the shore, thinking about legacy, what we build, what we leave behind, and how easily both can be taken or given back. One afternoon I sat down with Layla at her office. I want to change my will, I told her. The house. I don't want it passed down anymore. She raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? I slid her a piece of paper. I want it donated to the Art for Widows Foundation. They can turn it into a retreat for women who lost everything and need a place to start again. Layla smiled slowly. That's poetic. I laughed. It's practical. Let something good come from all this noise. When I signed the new document, I didn't feel sadness. I felt light. That house had seen too much pain. Too many ghosts of what used to be love. Maybe it was time it belonged to something bigger than my story. A few days later, the foundation's director visited. She walked through each room with quiet reverence, the same rooms that once echoed with arguments and betrayal. We'll restore it carefully, she promised. We'll keep your name on the gate. I smiled. Don't. Let it just be called the Blue House. That's enough. When she left, I sat on the porch, the ocean humming in the distance. The sky was gold, soft, forgiving. I thought about Evan and Clara wherever they were. I hoped they'd find their own kind of peace. People later said I'd gotten revenge. But revenge is loud, and what I found was quiet. It didn't burn, it settled. It didn't shout, it breathed. They called it revenge, I said, watching the horizon fade into evening. Called it peace. The waves rolled in, steady and patient, washing the sand clean again. And for the first time in a long time, so did I. The year passed quietly, the kind of year that doesn't rush. It just drifts like seafoam coming home to the shore. The house looked different now. No noise, no arguments, no shadows of what used to hurt. Just clean floors, soft light, and the sound of waves brushing against the rocks outside. I sat on the porch that morning, the blanket around my shoulders, the air cool and gentle. The ocean was calm, the sky still waking up. The gulls called in the distance, the same way they had when Evan was a boy running barefoot through the sand. On the table beside me was a framed photograph, 3 faces caught in the sunlight. Me, Andrew, and Evan, taken back when our laughter still came easy. The glass had cracked a little, but I never fixed it. Some things are meant to stay a little broken. I picked up the frame, traced my fingers along the edge, and whispered, I forgive you, Evan, but I will never forget. There wasn't anger anymore, it was truth. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just stops it from owning you. The breeze rolled in from the water, lifting the corner of the old curtain behind me. For a second it felt like the house itself exhaled. Inside, the walls were lighter, the rooms emptier but not lonely. The Art for Widows Foundation had done beautiful work, turned the guest rooms into small studios, filled the shelves with brushes, clay, and notebooks. Every month women came to stay here. They painted, they healed, they started over. Sometimes they asked me to join them, and I did, though my hands weren't as steady as they used to be. One of them once said, it's like this house forgave the world. I smiled and told her, maybe it just remembered who built it. As the sun climbed higher, the horizon glowed gold, the light touching everything, the porch rail, the teacup, the photograph in my hands. I watched it the way you watch something you know won't last but still means everything in the moment. In that quiet, my thoughts turned into a whisper only I could hear. Justice isn't revenge. It's self-respect. And self-respect is the quietest kind of love. That's what I'd learned after all of it. You can lose your home, your pride, even your family for a while. But if you keep your dignity, you never lose yourself. I sat there until the first warmth of sunlight touched my face. And for once, I didn't feel the need to move. The world didn't owe me anything. I'd already taken back what mattered, my peace. And as the tide rolled in, I smiled to myself, thinking that maybe peace was never something you find. Maybe it's something you choose over and over until it stays. If this story moved you, share it with someone who's ever been underestimated. Because silence isn't peace, and love without respect isn't family. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for remembering that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just sits quietly on a porch.